Hey everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to take a look at a lesser-known aspect called a Contra-Antiscia. And the reason for doing this is that by means of a Contra-Antiscia, Jupiter is about to get together with Neptune again. Yeah, surprise, surprise. You're thinking Jupiter's, moved out of Pisces. They had their moment in the sun in April. Jupiter's moved into Aries, and we're on to new things with the Jupiter-Neptune thing is in the rearview mirror, right? Well, kind of. Obviously, the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction tones a lot of what happens for the entire year, but it's interesting that right after they separate, Jupiter enters Aries and they start moving into what is called a Contra-Antiscia. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what that is. This is not like a master class today in Anticias or Contra-Anticias, but just a little bit of an awareness as to what they are. And I'll demonstrate for you what they are. And then we'll look at this Contra-Antiscia between Jupiter and Neptune. And I'll give you 5 things to watch for in terms of the archetypal combination of Jupiter-Neptune in this particular type of aspect. So before we dive into that, don't forget to like and subscribe, share your comments, click on the notification bell for updates, all of that good stuff. You can always find transcripts of my daily talks on my website, nightlightastrology.com, where you can also learn more about my new class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, which is starting on June 12th. It is coming up really soon now. You have just a little bit of time to sign up, but it is not too late. People have already received orientation materials. So as soon as you sign up, you will be getting a packet of information to go over and dive right into the class website and the class discussion forum where people are already kind of getting to know each other. It's been really fun to hear all those of you who have signed up and are already in. I'm so glad to meet you. I'm really excited to start class soon. Click on the first year course if you're visiting the website, nightlightastrology.com. And on that first year course page, you're going to scroll down to learn more about the program. We have a video with some Q&A that we did a few weeks ago with some of our alumni. Scroll down further, you can find more about what the class includes. 30 classes on the year, additional 12 guest lectures. We also have 8 breakout study tutoring sessions. We have tutoring staff in the discussion forum year-round, a ton of support. It's a really deep class. It is the perfect class to take if you are like, I love astrology, I want to go deeper, I'm ready to create a kind of a transformational moment in my life right now, spiritually, intellectually. This is something that I know I need because I love astrology. This is the perfect course for you. Also, if you're like, I love astrology, I want to get more serious about it, maybe read charts for other people, another great reason to take the program. All right, well, if you scroll down to the bottom, you can learn more about our payment options. There's an early bird payment, save you $500 off. You have until next week to take advantage of that. You also have a 12-month plan you can use or tuition assistance. Check out the need-based tuition. If that helps the program to become more accessible for you, then please do take advantage of that. We welcome anyone, regardless of what your financial situation might be. We try to come up with a solution to help you. So check that out and see if it might help. That is it. Any questions you have about the program, email us info@nightlightastrology.com. Okay, so did you know that Jupiter and Neptune are forming a Contra-Antiscia? Now, I'm putting down June 2nd through the 9th because today is June 2nd, but we've already been feeling this as early as the entrance of Jupiter into Aries. You could say that Jupiter has been moving back into an engagement with Neptune via Contra-Antiscia. So before I try to break down what to watch for with this combination, it's the reason that I need to break down the aspect first a little bit, tell you what a Contra-Antiscia is because this is going to be a different kind of meeting between the two planets than what we had in April. First of all, in April, Jupiter was in its own home sign of Pisces. Venus was in Pisces. Mars was in Pisces. Different feeling, different mood. The conjunction also is a very different kind of exchange between two planets than a Contra-Antiscia, which is like a secretive form of opposition. Has a little bit of a secretive, fly under the radar type of quality. Also more like an opposition than a conjunction. So we had the conjunction. Now, in some ways, right afterward, we're getting a little bit of oppositional tension between the two. That's really interesting. So before we dive into what to watch for, again, I'm going to share the screen. I'm going to show you the real-time clock, just give you a feeling for what a Contra-Antiscia is. All right, well, Contra-Antiscias, like Anticias, are formed around cardinal turning points. So the Anticias are formed around the winter and summer solstices, and obviously that's literally, that's flipped depending on what hemisphere you're in, but zodiacally speaking, we're talking about zodiacal winter solstice or zodiacal summer solstice. in the language of astrology, it's all symbolic. So let's go and I'll show you that. So here is 0 Capricorn. And up here we have 0 Cancer. Essentially, according to this little theory, the idea is that signs that are equal distance from that summer solstice or winter solstice point, such as Cancer and Gemini, or such as Leo and Taurus, or Virgo and Aries. Those signs carry what are called an Antiscia relationship. And what that basically means is that when planets are in those respective signs, say Aries, Virgo, 2 planets in those 2 signs, Taurus and Leo in those 2 signs, or Gemini and Cancer in those 2 signs, and the degrees of the 2 planets in those 2 respective signs add up to 30 degrees, then you have an Antiscia. Antiscia basically means that the planets are located on degrees of the zodiac where, when the sun is at those degrees, there is an equal amount of light and dark in the 24-hour period. The difference will always be that on one side of the solstice point, that while the days may be of the same length, the light is gaining versus declining. Okay, so for example, 10 days prior to the summer solstice, there will be roughly an equal amount of sunlight and darkness in the 24-hour period as there will be 10 days after the summer solstice. The difference being that after the summer solstice, the light of the solar year is waning, whereas 10 days before the summer solstice, it was waxing. Still, there's an equal amount of light and dark on those 2 days when the sun is on the degrees, the zodiacal degrees that constitute those days of the solar year. So for that reason, when 2 planets reach those degrees and their degrees add up to 30 in those 2 respective signs, there's said to be a sort of secretive or hidden form of conjunction between them. Okay, if you go back in my archives, you can find full talks that I've done about Antiscia and Contra-Antiscia before. So I'm just kind of zipping through it because I really want to get to talking about what to watch for. But when it comes to Contra-Antiscia, it's the opposite points. We're now talking about the 0 degree marker of Libra, the fall equinox, and the 0 degree marker of Aries, the spring equinox. And now what we're saying is that signs on either side of those two points in the solar year are also going to share a kind of relationship. So Pisces and Aries, Aquarius and Taurus, or Capricorn and Gemini. And what we're saying is that when planets they have to have 2 planets in the respective signs that you see me connecting here in the diagram. When 2 planets are in those 2 signs and their degree total adds up to 30, we have what's called a Contra-Antiscia. Contra-Antiscia is like a secretive or subtle form of opposition. Okay, so why opposition rather than conjunction? Now this has to do with the nature of what's happening when the sun is on the degrees around the equinox points, just like the sun is configured around the solstice. So for example, when we are 5 days prior to the spring equinox and 5 days after the spring equinox, there will be roughly an equal but opposite amount of light versus dark. So for example, let's say 5 days prior to the spring equinox, there's 5 points more on the dark or yin side of the year. There's 5 units more darkness than there is light. 5 days after the spring equinox, as the light has taken over, there will be 5 units more light than there is darkness. So they're sort of equal but opposite points of light versus darkness, equal in strength, but opposite in terms of the light or dark quality. So, and there's more to it than that. I'm going to kind of just leave it there, but that's the simple explanation. So right now, what do we see? Well, woody-doty. We see Jupiter and Neptune adding up to 30 degrees. There they are. And I'm keeping this really simple because you actually have to add their minutes up as well. But technically, Jupiter at 4 degrees and change and Neptune at 25 degrees and change is adding up to 30. So between June 2nd and the 9th, loosely speaking, during that range, you're going to see Jupiter very slowly moving through what is the equivalent of a subtle, sort of sometimes secretive, flying under the radar form of opposition with Neptune. So now that I've kind of broken that down, and I apologize, I know some people are going to be like, wait, can we do the masterclass where I really understand this thing and then get to use it all the time? And sadly, no. So we're going to go right from that brief explanation into a what to watch for. And I'm telling you right now, if you're like, hey, I really want to know more about that, search my archives, because if you look, I think I've got like 1,000 videos or something at this point. But if you look back in my archives and search Antiscia and Contra-Antiscia, you're going to find at least a few videos where I break down the concept in depth. Okay, so if you are like, I really want to know more about that theoretically, just do that, because, and maybe I can even try to link some of the videos in the description of this video. In fact, we'll do that. So you can check that out. All right, but 5 things to watch for, given that Jupiter in Aries is now re-engaging with Neptune in Pisces, but through this sort of lesser known aspect called a Contra-Antiscia. Well, Jupiter and Neptune conjoining have a seeding quality, whereas Jupiter and Neptune opposing have more of that full moon quality of things blossoming and of diametrically opposed values, ideals, energies, and archetypes sort of duking it out. All right, so 5 things to watch for, considering that this is the kind of relationship that Jupiter in Aries now has with Neptune in Pisces. One is going to be that there is the sense of having to crusade, overcome, or achieve something against odds or opposition, and that there may be a romanticizing of the conflict that happens, or there may be a sense in which you're fighting the good fight, and it's got kind of that almost like Hollywood epic quality. So crusading, overcoming, achieving against oppositions, against all odds, doing the noble, ideal, beautiful thing, fighting the good fight. It's like, that's a Neptune Jupiter quality. It's very heroic. It can be a little exaggerated and over the top. It can love crusading for the sake of crusading. It's like, well, what happens when the war is over? It's not a great question for Jupiter Neptune. It's going to struggle. It's a bit like Jupiter Neptune, to give an opposition, is a bit like what was his name? Not Captain Jack, Captain something. I can't remember his name, from Forrest Gump. Remember the Vietnam vet that Forrest Gump, Major Dan? I can't remember his name. Anyway, he was the guy that ended up getting into the shrimp business at some point with him after I think he had a friend. Anyway, I'm getting the movie like all mixed up in my head. But he was the guy, he's sitting in the boat and they're out at sea, and he's sort of like really disillusioned from the Vietnam War, and he's like raging against the ocean, That's a great Jupiter Neptune dynamic right there. So it loves a crusade. It can create one out of thin air. So this is some of the things. These are some of the qualities to watch for: crusading, overcoming against all odds, achieving against opposition, and this kind of romantic, somewhat manic energy surrounding all of it. 2 would be an effort or a crusade falling apart, a cause no longer concerning, disillusionment with a belief or practice, as in Major Dan. Why? I can't. I'm going to be sitting here for after I get off of this, the first thing I'm going to do is look it up on freaking Google. Anyway, so let's just say that it's a disillusionment with a belief or a practice, an effort falling apart, a cause no longer concerning us, that the war is over and now I don't care any longer. So it could go that direction too. We kind of think of the dissolution of something Jupiterian. Now, I said the death of a Jupiterian figure, but that could also be the dissolution of Jupiter, dissolution or death of something Jupiterian, a major, a general, a major sports icon, or the tragic death or loss of someone or something that has been in the spotlight doing Jupiter and Aries-like things. Political leaders, movie stars, especially like action movie stars, or fighter pilots crashing into the ocean. I think Top Gun just came out again. In fact, I know it did because I'm going to see it. Let's not lie, Acyuta. Let's not lie about your Top Gun. So wasn't intentional. Any kind of dissolution of a Jupiterian figure, or any kind of athlete, or it was a very similar Contra-Antiscia when Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter accident, for example. God forbid that anything like that tragic, anything tragic happens, but also anything involving Jupiter, something Jupiter in Aries, like hitting the water, crashing, sinking, water and fire combinations, any kind of death or dissolution of something Jupiterian, right? Watch for that. Number 4 would be, now this is where you get into that almost secretive, covert, underlying quality of the Contra-Antiscia as well as the opposition. A secret or covert action, attack, statement, ambush, perhaps fueled by some righteous crusade or cause or belief or philosophy or something like that. But it would probably be like, whoa, that was out of left field. Wasn't expecting that. You could feel ganged up on, or almost like espionage feeling behind it. Jupiter's not quite the espionage planet, but when you get Jupiter with Neptune and Jupiter's in a Mars-ruled sign, okay, maybe there's something being done, like a plan that's been hatched secretively in it, like an attack that's being carried out or something like that. I hate to say that, but that's one of the things that can come up with this particular combination. Finally, I would imagine that any kind of underlying opposition that is within your own psyche bubbling up to the surface, an ideological conflict that you have within yourself. I believe this. Do I believe that? I believe two different things at once. I don't know how to reconcile them. Or any kind of underlying opposition popping up in work, in love, in relationships that sparks some kind of debate, power struggle, or ideological bashing of heads. But it would be something that was subtle, that was sort of rising to the surface, that's been there for a while, or is bubbling over suddenly, or suddenly you're very overwhelmed by something that feels that it has that Jupiter and Aries quality to it. It could also be any kind of disillusionment with a belief or practice, back to number 2. So anything that where suddenly you feel like you're confronting, like, I no longer believe this, or this doesn't do it for me anymore, or I have serious doubt, and I'm, so Jupiter Neptune together is like the vision, the faith, the hope, the seed being planted of some, some horizon opening and expanding. Jupiter Neptune oppositions are sometimes expansive, but they also can bring up different kinds of conflicts of within our imagination, of competing visions or ideals or beliefs or philosophies. It can also involve the death or dissolution of like a teacher or mentor, or, like, oh, I've been following the teachings of so-and-so for a very long time, and I've met a different teacher. And so, it's like a new season in my life, or a new way of thinking or believing, or, it doesn't have to be necessarily like anything scandalous or hurtful that's happening. On the other hand, I would not be surprised where you see a Jupiter-Neptune opposition rising to the surface in some underlying scandal that has existed within a religious institution or educational institution or something like that comes to the surface. So those are the kinds of things that I would watch for, generally speaking, with this transit. Those are my 5. You could go, you could probably add 10 more if you kept turning the jewel, but I just want to give you a feel for what to watch for. It's a big enough transit because it's lasting well into next week, that I think everyone should know about it. And just felt like it didn't make it into my transits of the month, but only because it flew under my radar, as Anticias and Contra-Anticias are wont to do. So as I noticed it, I was like, I'm feeling that, I can notice that energy. So I feel like we should talk about it. Anyway, I'd love to hear your stories. If you notice anything, if you see something, say something. that's the phrase for astrologers too, I guess. Share your stories at #grabbed, or email us grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. If there is a transit that catches your eye, please always share it. We loved collecting those stories and hearing. The ancient name for the planets was grahas, which means grabbers. I mean, like the planets seize our consciousness, and they often are so wonderfully instructive as a result of paying attention to them. We learn and we grow. So when you share what you've learned and grown and seen from transits, we learn astrology, and we learn how to live better, more deep, amazing lives. So share your stories, use the #grabbed, or email grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. Just don't send us anything you don't want potentially being read in a future episode of the Grabbed series. You can also, as always, like, subscribe, leave your comments. That helps the show to grow. Check out transcripts on the website if you need them. The new class on the website is also something to look into. Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. It starts on June 12th. Year 2 and horary classes start on the 11th and 12th as well. Any questions about anything regarding the upcoming classes, info@nightlightastrology.com. Really glad to be getting to know some of you right away. I can't wait for class to start. We're almost there. So we'll see you guys soon. and be back for more tomorrow. Take it easy, everyone.